Hello, and thank you for tuning in to hear our conversation today with David Robertson, former professional soccer player and current manager of Real Kashmir in the Indian Super League. My name is Eric McAleer, and I'm the General Manager of WorldStrides Sports Division. Our Starting 11 speaker series is based around conversations with some of the top minds in the world of football with a specific interest around leadership, culture, and their coaching journey. I'm excited to welcome David to share some of his experience, insights, and reflections with our global community. First, David, I want to give an audience just a look back at your career, which has certainly been a fascinating journey. Growing up in Aberdeen, David broke into the first team at Aberdeen at the young age of 17 and won both a Scottish League Cup and Scottish Cup with the Dons, and followed that by a move to Glasgow Rangers in 1991. David went on to help the Gers win the final probably 6 or 9 champions in a row, and he also won 3 caps for Scotland, then moving on to have a great spell in England with Leeds United. David had since embarked on a coaching career which has taken him to Scotland, Phoenix, Arizona, and then most recently finishing up in India. And joining us today from India, David, welcome and thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. Yep, in a lockdown in a war zone, so you can't go be more unlucky than I am at the moment.
So how are you surviving just now, David?
Well, it's hard. We've been here. Well, obviously I've worked here, but I've got the unfortunate, or maybe my wife's a little bit unfortunate that I persuaded her to come over about 2 weeks before the lockdown here. So I'm beginning to pay the price for that one. But we're safe enough where we are, and we're just trying to get home. We've been in touch with the British government and all sorts. So there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. We're hoping maybe next week can get home. But that's 42 days we've been in lockdown in the hotel in the middle of a war zone. So it's not the place I'd like to be at the moment, but it's what it is.
You've got family around there with you, David?
Yeah, Mason's here as well. So obviously got Mason and my wife. My daughter's in Leeds with her boyfriend at the moment, and Jordan, our other son's in our house in Aberdeen. And obviously our families, my wife and myself, our families are both from Aberdeen. They're there as well. And it just feels a bit weird being away from home. My mother's not too well at the moment. She's fighting cancer. So right. She's got radiotherapy today. So it's harder. You know, I think what I was saying to my wife the other day is that I'm 51 years old and I've always been a flight or a day away from being home to see my parents. And now it's out with my control if anything was to happen. It's just the world's just in a strange place at the moment.
Yeah, it is. It is, and let's just take it back, David. We'll get into it here. As just as we were talking prior to recording there, you and I first met back in 1984. Scotland Schoolboy trials. I actually remember being your partner, splitting up into groups of 2s. Scotland Schoolboys trials, 1984 at Inverclyde and Largs, and in fact, I remember the first session we did, and Andy Roxburgh was running the session. And we were working with you as well. I remember it like yesterday. And take us back to that part of your career, Davey, and you know how you all get moving. And certainly, you know, a young player coming down from Aberdeen into the west of Scotland, and I'm sure that was, you know, an eye opener for you at 14 years old as well.
Yeah, I remember the time when, you know, I'd probably just never really set foot. The world's in a bigger place now, but I think in those days I was, you know, an Aberdonian, like all Aberdonians, shy, timid, you know, terrified of stepping outside Aberdeen. I think I'd been out once before in a Scottish Cup game for my school team and played in a Blaze pitch in Glasgow, and we got intimidated and scarred to death and what have you. And then, you know, I think it really affected me early on, the intimidation part of it. So the first trial that you're talking about, it was just a local one in Aberdeen. And I remember I was flying, I was a left winger and scored 6 goals in the trial. Then they added in the Peterhead and Inverness people. I scored 4 goals. Then added in Dundee and scored 2 goals. And then it was the whole of Scotland. All the Glaswegians came in and it all fell apart. Had a disaster. And like you were talking about, we're on an AstroTurf pitch. I remember that. First time I'd ever been on an AstroTurf pitch. And we're playing with a tennis ball, first session. And then I actually thought to myself at that point, I'd never played with a tennis ball. I'd never been on AstroTurf, never seen it. And I thought maybe that's why all these Glaswegians are better than we are. And it's just such a it's intimidating. It was in those days. It was very intimidating coming down, and we always felt that we were like second class, even though there was a lot of Aberdonians that made it. You spoke about them earlier, Alan Selby's, McCombies, and Robert McRobb and Scott Tate, but it was just an intimidating feeling. I think just because Glaswegians, we felt in those days, were so confident and overconfident. Even like when we became an S form at Aberdeen, there was a snooker table at Pittodrie, and Alec Ferguson was great. He'd get all the S forms up for school holidays, summer holidays, Easter holidays, you name it. And this snooker table, Aberdonians would sit one side to get changed. Other side would be the Glaswegians, guys like Paul Wright, Stevie Gray, Joe Miller, those guys. And they were just full of it. They're climbing on snooker tables, they're battering us to death. And we were sitting like mice, terrified to even look at them. And that's something that, I don't know if it's changed, but that's something I had to overcome pretty quickly. Particularly being involved in the early days of Alec Ferguson, but those memories, like Facebook's been great. I think a lot of people have contacted me. I think we spoke about Paul Hunter, guy at East Fife. It was only about 2-3 weeks ago he connected with me on Facebook, and as soon as you see those people, you just go back to memories. And I would have a very good career, but I think that's the younger days at the start. You wish you could rewind it and go through it again, because it was just it was great grounding, and I think you learn a lot about yourself. And it was that particular. I didn't make the team. I remember we went back to Pittodrie, and I think it was pre-season. I'm not sure when the trials were. And I remember Scott Tate, who ended up being my best man when we got married.
Great goalkeeper.
Yeah, and he came in and says, "Well, did you get a letter?" I think, "What for?" He goes, "I made the Scotland under-15 team, and I never got the letter. And then I went home, 2 buses to get home, to get the disappointment I didn't make it." And I do think to this day that I managed to play for Scotland every other level, but I do feel it was the intimidation part, the first time out of my own comfort zone. And again, here I find myself out in India, and can't speak the language, nothing. So it certainly put me in good stead for my future.
It definitely did, David. But when you think of, when you think back now, 37 years ago, what a priceless upbringing. Just so randomly happens that you're born and raised in Aberdeen, and who's running the club but Sir Alex Ferguson. And you look at the crop of players coming through, and you look back and reflect on that now, and I'm sure that you take a lot from those days.
Yeah, well, I was not just Alex Ferguson. Archie Knox was there as well, and Archie, obviously, he was there 6 years at Rangers and most of my time at Aberdeen, so I spent a lot of my career with Archie. But even at Aberdeen at the time, there was Bobby Clark, who was the youth coaches. There was Teddy Scott, George Adams, who's gone on to great things, and Lenny Taylor, who ended up heading up Aberdeen youth for so many years. But I think one of the things I'll never forget.
Sorry to interrupt you, David. So we interviewed Bobby Clark 2 days ago, and you know Bobby, and I love Bobby. It was a really short interview for Bobby. It was an hour and 40 minutes, and he was sitting on the golf course. He's living in a new house in Lossiemouth, and gave us a guided tour of the golf course. And he talks fondly of those days when he took your team in Aberdeen with Lenny Taylor, and that was his format of years as a coach. And he looks back, so fondly to those times, because that was when it all began from, and that was your particular group.
Yeah, I think what I remember was, it was like you play primary school, you get in the primary school select, and then once you go to high school, I went to Harlow Academy, all the players that were in the primary school select had to train on a Monday night at Pittodrie, but in the car park. Opposite the main stand, so this Blaze, Ash and whatever, and 9 times out of 10, you'd be playing against a Highland League team. And we are 12, 13-year-old, and at the time it was brutal because it was windy, it was sort of like these portable goals. You've got these guys that are 35-year-old that just kick the living daylights out of you. And at the time you think, oh, it's brutal. And the worst thing is you take 2 buses to get there for torture. And it's not until later on you realise that it actually made you as a player. We might have, all of us, we'd lose 3-4 nothing or whatever, and we'd probably run around just getting kicked, pulling ourselves up off the ground, probably not even touching the ball very many times. But the one thing I remember is Fergie would come and watch those games on a Monday night, rain, hail or shine, whatever. And my dad once heard Fergie talking to Lenny Taylor and Bobby Clark, and he says, this guy's got something, this guy's got something. And shortly after that, I don't know how it happened, but Manchester United scout came to my door
Right.
or came to my parents' door and asked me to go to Manchester United. But in those days, you couldn't sign schoolboy forms till a year later. In Scotland, it was maybe 13 or something.
Right.
So shortly after, Alec Ferguson took me down to Pittodrie and offered me to sign S forms for Aberdeen. And,
Right.
you know, and it's so different to how things are today because, you know, normally even the kids, young kids, 14, 15, will get agents, they're complaining about money and all that kind of stuff. I just says, yeah, I'll sign.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I said, the game's changed a lot. But those early days, even the fact, like Fergie would take 13, 14-year-olds into train Easter holidays with the first, not even the reserves, the first team.
Yeah.
You know, and I was playing with, around about that time, Aberdeen were beating Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, and I'm training with Eric Black, Peter Weir, Willie Miller, and half of these players I ended up a few years later playing in the first team with. But it was Gordon Strachan, Mark McGee, an amazing experience. And that's just how Fergie was. But the one I remember there, Archie, this was the first encounter I had with Archie. So they didn't give you training kit, the young boys coming in, you had to take your own stuff, but it had to be Adidas.
Yeah.
And me being a little bit naive at 13 or 14-year-old, I show up and the only pair of Adidas shorts I've got is the Dundee United ones, you know, the black ones with the 3 orange stripes. So I put them on and Archie comes in the dressing room and he looks at me and he doesn't even talk to me, he just looks and actually physically pulls the shorts off me, puts them in the bin. And then some guy comes in with it, must have been about a triple XL pair of shorts, and I've got to wear them in training to teach me a lesson.
Yeah, yeah. But you think of those days, David, and you also think of the players that came through at that time. You know, it's just top internationals. It is, you know, the Joe Miller and Paul Wright and Ian Jess and you know, all around your age group. Even after that, Stephen Glass and, you know, continuing on down the line. And you think of that youth system in those days, but also, you know, not just necessarily at Aberdeen, but you think of Dundee United at the same time. You know, the amount of players that they were producing. And you think back to Duncan Ferguson and you think back to, you know, all the players, the Andy McLarens and Paddy Conleys. And, you know, that was a great era for you, I'm sure. Yeah,
well, I mean, it was just great even being a part of it. But I think when you look at the Aberdeen team and even the Dundee United team that were successful in Europe, you had Aberdeen that, you know, John Hewitt scored a winner in a European Cup final, a European Cup Winners' Cup final. Yeah. The midfield, which is probably the main part of the team, with Neil Cooper and Neil Simpson, local boys.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and Eric Black came through the system. You know, he ended up playing in big clubs, and obviously like McLeish and even Willie Miller, they started off their careers there. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of it. But I think that the culture that Fergie brought in, and it wasn't so much finesse; it was more hard-working. You know, humble. Even Willie Miller, Alec McLeish, all those guys were very, very humble people. And as young kids, you know, guys like Doug Rugby and Gordon Strachan, you come in at 13-year-old and you're terrified of these guys, but they treat you like their son, like their brother.
Yeah.
And I think those moments just, I mean, you would never hear of that now. And then you look at the Dundee United team, the guys like John Clark, Kevin Gallagher, you know, playing in top games. And I think that it's sad to say that, you know, that the game's changed a little bit now and you don't get so much part of that. But the experience was incredible. And as I said earlier, I think the upbringing, it makes you who you are. And I think you really appreciate, because when I was a kid, I never thought I was good enough to play the level I played. Even each game at Rangers, at Aberdeen, I was always looking over my shoulder that, am I really playing here?
Yeah.
You know, so I treated every game as if I wasn't good enough and had to prove that I was good enough to go and do it. Even to this day, you know, I watch videos of myself and I think, God, I wasn't a bad player. But at the time, I used to be so critical of myself and, you know, basically sort of slap my face to think, am I actually really here on a team bus with Willie Miller, Peter Weir, you know, in the Rangers, you've got McCoy's and Hateleys and Coffeys and all these guys that you got to pinch yourself that, you know, an Aberdonian guy that was terrified to basically talk to anybody. All throughout my career, I was very quiet.
And was that something you found, David? You look at the career you had and you just moved on to, you know, touching on Rangers there. Look at the highs that you had at Rangers for a very sustained period of time. You know, is that something just you personally, you know, just you, probably your upbringing, is that something you just fought with through the years?
It was. I mean, I was never the most confident person in my own ability. You know, when I look back at my career, I can say, okay, I had a bit of pace. I could make a tackle now and again. Passing wasn't the best. Crossing wasn't the best. somehow I ended up, winning a lot more trophies than a lot of players ever do in their career. But I think the one thing was I always had that desire that I wanted to better myself. I wanted to make sure that, next week I'm going to play. Next week I'm going to be in the team. And I never took anything for granted. But when you go to Rangers, though, it's like Aberdeen. I remember we won the League Cup. We'd lost 2 previous cup finals to Rangers, and we finally won the third one. And the feeling of going down on an open top bus down Union Street was incredible, because I never played football until I was 8 or 9. And the bug came when Aberdeen beat Celtic in the 1976 League Cup final. They beat Celtic 2-1. I think it was Drew Jarvie and Joe Harper scored. Maybe Kenny Dalglish scored for Celtic. I'm not sure. I wasn't interested. Mum and Dad took me down, bought me all the banners, because my dad wanted me to get into football, but I just wasn't interested. Yeah. And then I was hooked on after that. And, and it was probably that was 1976, and you're probably talking, in the 90s, maybe 12 years later, I'm on the same bus going down Union Street, and it's with all these thousands of people coming out. And we won the double that year, and the feeling was just, incredible. Just being a part of it, and your life changes. As soon as you play that first team game for Aberdeen, your life changes, and you suddenly become a local celebrity, and that's something I found very difficult throughout my career to deal with.
And especially the size of Aberdeen as a city, and you going to Harlow, and growing up in the city is that must have changed your life tenfold. And then obviously, fast forward a short period of time, and you're winning all sorts of league titles, but obviously going in European competition, and just the quality of players. Is there any in particular that you think of at your time at Rangers that just stood out? I'm thinking of the Loudrops or Gascoignes. Is there any that jumps out to you that you just think back and you were amazed at?
I think Loudrop for me is by far the best player I've ever played with, and I think it's just these. I remember his first game he played at Clyde. It was a pre-season game, and Walter Smith wasn't there. So bearing in mind, he's played for Arrigo Sacchi and AC Milan and all that. And the Rangers at that time, pre-season games it was just a game. There was no real team talk. There was nothing. And I remember Archie saying to Brian Loudrop, he says, "Brian, just you run fast and score goals." Right? And he's looking as if to say, he's just been with probably the best coach in the world. And that's the advice he gets. So we're playing at Broadwood. And all this hype about Brian Loudrop, how great he was and how brilliant a player he was. And I remember, he was kicking the ball out the park and tight pass to me, it's going out the park and everything. I'm walking at half time, I think this guy's overrated. I mean, there's a lot of hype over this guy, but he's not the best, right? Yeah. And then I realised it was me that wasn't the best. Yeah. He was light years ahead of everybody, and it took me maybe a month or so to get used to. He made a pass and thinking, "Oh, that's where I'm meant to be, is it? Oh, right, okay." Yeah. So that was an amazing, but just Rangers in general, going from Aberdeen, like the local club, and I'm not saying Aberdeen's not a big club, but you go to Rangers, and I remember the first day. First of all, you've got to wear in those days you had to wear a collar and tie every day to training. Yeah. So I didn't even own a collar, tie, or a suit or anything. So I had to buy some suits before my first day at Rangers. So I remember driving in, and you go through the marble in the main door at Ibrox, in the marble staircase, and there's a commissioner, guy with a suit on stand. Okay, so you go in here, you introduce yourself to him. He passes you through to Jimmy Bell, the kit man. Yeah. He takes you down the corridor, and he says, because in those days there was no squad numbers, it was like training numbers. Yeah. So he takes me I walk in the dressing room, and there's, Mo Johnson, Andy Gorham was there, I think Mark Walters was there, Mark Haitley, all these superstars, Mikhailichenko, all these guys. I'm thinking, oh, why am I here? I just wanted to turn and walk out. I think I shouldn't be here. Yeah. And then he says to me, and this is your number here, number 6. He says, "You've got big shoes to fill." He says, "That's Terry Butcher's number." And I'm thinking, oh, great, thanks very much. And then I was so number 5 was Goffey, there was me, and then I was Ian Ferguson, and I was just close to that corner of Ian Ferguson, Ian Durrant, Ali McCoist, the Joker's corner, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, it's going to be a rough few years here. But to be fair, at Rangers, as many superstars they were all down to earth. Everybody was treated the same. Everybody respected each other, which was unbelievable, really, that happened.
And you think of that changing room, Davy, is that must have been kind of the making of you. you know, to go into all those big personalities and, you know, the level that they were playing at every game and the expectations of playing for Rangers, that must have been, you know, a huge advance for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, they all helped me great. I remember my initiation in Italy with the team. So I was a bag of nerves. I can't sing. Those days, I never said more than 2 words in those days.
Yeah.
So I remember we were in El Choco in Italy, and the last night or the second last night, you know, there's a bus that takes you into town for a few drinks and what have you. But you've got told you have to sing a song at the front of the bus in the microphone. So I'm panicking. Oh my God! So Mo Johnson comes to me after training. He says, "Robbo, what you got to sing tonight?" He goes, "I've got no idea what to sing," because I had no idea what I was going to sing. So of all the people to take advice from, I took it from Mo Johnson, and he says to me, "Why don't you sing the Northern Lights of Old Aberdeen?" So I thought, he says, the boys will love it. They'll think it's great. So anyway, I opened up. I got past the first two sentences or 2 lines or whatever. I got dragged up the back of the bus and they just beat the hell out of me. So that was at least I didn't have to sing, but that was of all the people, I soon learned my lesson, never listen to Mo Johnson on anything.
Oh, gee, but what a fantastic changing room for you through the years. So David, just when you think back to, obviously now you've coached all over the world, you think of the jobs that you've been in and, you know, the journey you've been on. I know you and I sat down quite a number of times at the various conventions all over the US, and we always, you know, got our heads together and started dissecting US soccer. You know, what your experience of US soccer, the differences that, you know, from you being embedded in it? I remember you were at Sereno for a while, and, you know, what's your experiences looking back and reflecting on that? And you know, is what did you take from that and learn from that as well?
I think first and foremost, I actually became a better game day coach.
Yeah.
Based on the fact that I coached, I started off at Sereno. Ali Maxwell and Les Armstrong took me over, and I coached 3 teams, and I thought that's great, 3 teams, you know, go home at night, you know, obviously train at night, you got a bit of free time, enjoy the sunshine with a house with a pool. It was great. And then Les and Ali left, they moved on, and I became the boys director of coaching, still coaching 3 teams. Then I became the overall director of coaching, still coaching 3 teams.
Yeah.
And then I became the executive director, you know, doing, you know, payroll, hiring, firing, board meetings, you name it. I was doing every meeting, parents, you know, dealing with parents' complaints and what have you. So my day soon changed to becoming 8 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the office, then training 4:30 till maybe 9, 10 at night.
Yeah.
You know, Monday through Thursday. And because you're coaching 3 teams, if you're on a tournament, you're coaching, you know, between 9 and 15 games a weekend if it's a long holiday weekend. Yeah. And I think it took its toll on me, to be honest, because there's only so much you can do. You go over there expecting a nice, easy lifestyle and what have you. But in America, you do have to work hard. And no one really asks you to do anything. It just sort of lands on your plate that you have to do it. Yeah. And I enjoyed my time there, but I do think as a coach, it helped me because, you know, if you're coaching 12, 15 games a weekend, and people listening in might think, how on earth can you coach that amount of games? But that's what happened. You'd be on the fields at 8 in the morning till maybe 8 at night. Yeah. And I don't know how many times I was coaching games, and it just shows you at times the kids don't listen to you. Yeah. I remember I did a halftime team talk. And afterwards, the second half started, I'm thinking, God, I'm talking about the game before this, the game that I coached, and it just shows you the kids have got no, you know, at times you even get the kids' names wrong because you're that delirious in the sunshine. But I think it was a great experience, and I think you come across all different types of nationalities. Obviously, you go to California, there's American coaches, you've got the Mexican coaches, you've got guys from Argentina, South America, with guys from Dubai. Where was it? The Middle East came over, and you had to play against all different types of formations. Yeah. You had to adapt to it. You know, and you play against teams that are a lot better than what you've got. You've got to try and find a way to sort of even stop them or whatever. And because you're coaching so many games, you know, like at Real Kashmir here or a professional level, you've got 1 game a week. So you plan for that game. But there's sometimes where you can't plan. If you've got all these games and suddenly in a semi-final against a team you don't know and you're getting beat 2-0, you've just got to try something. Yeah. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. And I think it just makes you a better game day coach. And I think that's the one thing that really, really made me the coach I was, because when I first started at Elgin, I was very, very, you know, naive and and immature at times. But I think for me in Arizona, the club soccer, it was a great experience. But you know, I don't know if I should say this, but sometimes in a club like Sereno, that the parents sort of take over.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's
and
all
it's
these,
just a different
what would I say, agendas and all sorts of stuff, and it just really it wore me out in the end.
Yeah, oh, I bet. And I remember sitting down with you one year at the convention, and I think you'd just taken over the PDL team as well, which was the kind of pro team, if I remember right. And that was coming towards the end of your time there. And I could see you'd added the pro club to your remit as well. And then all of a sudden you were looking at senior players, professional players, and I think you'd done the whole gamut by that time.
Yeah, well, it was actually with the USL, it was Phoenix FC, which is now Phoenix Rising. And I remember one time Mason's team, they came back as under 19s, and they obviously they won the State Cup, so they were going to Hawaii for regionals. But the USL season was on at that time, and it just shows you the commitment and the travelling and that you have to do as a coach. And I never complained about it. I just did it. Yeah. So I played. I think we played Real Monarchs. Or RSL, I can't remember what they were called in those days, RSL. We played them in ASU Stadium. Straight after the game, I flew to Hawaii, 5 hours. And a flight, and I coached the Monday, Tuesday, and I had somebody else, I think Brian was taking the training session of the Phoenix FC while I was away. On the Monday, on the sort of Wednesday, Tuesday after the game, I flew back to Phoenix we played Dayton Dutch Lions that night. At ASU, did that game. As soon as the game was finished, I flew back to Hawaii to finish the tournament off. It's incredible. And I remember we used to laugh in the office at Sereno. We used to say, because the traveling you did was unbelievable. Yeah. So I actually coached 3 games in one day in 3 different states in America.
Yeah, and that just sums it up. That just sums it up. This sounds great, Damien. Just a couple of quick questions here to finish. As you look back in your career, can you share some of the best leaders that you played under or played with? You know, certainly, there's quite a few that jump to mind when I think of you. But you know, who are the best and strongest leaders that you either played for or played with during your journey?
Yeah, I think I was fortunate with Alec Ferguson and Walter Smith. Alec Ferguson was the younger days. He used to rule by fear, and you know, but he had a very, very good side to you. He was very good. He was very good to me. When I was 18, he tried to take me to Manchester United when he went there, but Aberdeen wouldn't let me go at the time. But you know, it's the little things that you remember. I remember one time. You probably remember. You probably had one of his hairstyles. Remember the Charlie Nicholas hairstyle?
Oh, I remember it well, with a long mullet in the back. Maybe perm down there as well.
Yeah. So Fergie's thing was, if you remember, Pataudi, there was a away dressing room, home dressing room, and then the coach's room, so they could see everything. So I remember one day I walked in and he goes, I had this big, massive perm, and he goes, "Hey, Robertson, come here, Robertson, come here." So I go in, he says, "You get that buddy haircut, you get that buddy haircut." So you go away and you go to the hairdresser and you get a bit of this taken off. Next day you walk in, you think, "I'm okay, I'm great." "Robertson, come here. He goes, "I told you to get your buddy haircut." So you know what he did? He took me up the hairdresser and got my haircut.
No.
He physically took me up, yeah. And there was another time when I think it was Willie Faulkner. He missed an open goal. And after the game, he says to him, "You need to get an eye test. You need to go and get an eye test." So the next morning, Fergie took him to get an eye test.
No.
But it was just, and it was little things like, I remember in games, just sort of perfectionist he was. I remember one time we played Clydebank in the first team. I was about 18 or 19. I remember walking off and guys like Peter Weir were saying, "I'm going to get it here, I'm going to get it here." And I just, but we won 5-0. But he remembered every single mistake, and he win, lose or draw, he would crucify you for the mistake. And I remember one game we were playing against Motherwell, and we were 2-1 up, and there was about a minute to go, and John Gagan, you know, dances at you. I take him down in the box, and he went through me like a ton of bricks. It was actually my sister's wedding that day. So I had to go to the wedding afterwards, obviously feeling a bit crap. So anyway, he slaughtered me. But on the Monday, he'd take you in and he would say, "Look, this is what you have to do, blah, 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 blah." And I never gave away another penalty kick in my career. And then you get a guy like Walter Smith. And what I liked about him was that the one thing he said to me when I signed for Rangers was, "You look after me and I'll look after you." And he gave me one bollocking the whole time I was there. in 6 years, and it was against Hibs when we lost in the semi-final. He says to me, he says, "You're at Rangers now, you can't hide. If you take the ball and you put it in the stand, I don't care, but don't hide."
Yeah.
And then there was a period, because obviously Rangers is a very, very pressurised job.
Yeah.
And if you remember, we played, who was it we played? We played, I think we got knocked out of the cup by Falkirk, we got knocked out by AEK Athens, we got knocked out, Celtic beats in the Old Firm game, and the sky was falling, they were all gunning for Walter Smith. And the one thing was, and I've been with a lot of managers that show pressure when the pressure, he showed no pressure, it was business as usual. And when you think about it, he wasn't like your big time manager, he'd always been an assistant, he stepped into this big job, but he just had, and he took all the pressure away from the players, and we played freely all the time. And I think that was pretty good at that point. And then you've got players like, I always laugh at Willie Miller and Alec McLeish. When you think as a 17-year-old, you've got Jim Leighton, Stuart McKimmie, Willie Miller, Alec McLeish, Peter Weir, Jim Bett, Neil Simpson was playing, Billy Stark, John Hewitt, David, fantastic team.
Yeah.
And Willie Miller was like, he was like Mr. Grumpy. So he'd be the guy that would slaughter me all the time. And if you remember that the main stand at Pittodrie, it's quite a high, the billboards are quite high.
Yeah.
And the amount of times that he would play a pass to me to go straight in, and he'd shout at me and slaughter me and point fingers. And because he was a hero, the supporters would turn on me. Yeah. And then you've got Alec McLeish, who's even to this day is just a total gentleman. And he helped me a lot, during my career. And he was a real leader for me, because as a young kid, you make mistakes, you'd give away free kicks, somebody would beat you, you wouldn't follow a man, and he would never shout at you, he'd actually explain to you.
Yeah.
And he's, as a player, and then obviously you get guys like Richard Gough that never spoke too much, but he was just a leader on the pitch. He had that presence about him.
Yeah.
He just the stature. I didn't say a lot, but whatever the little amount of words he said really did sort of mean something, and that was a huge part of the Rangers team at that point.
And just huge personalities through that journey, David. And certainly just to bring us to a close here, this has been fantastic. I think final question really is two final questions. Number one, what are you most looking forward to getting back to? Post coronavirus and what's next? What are you excited about, David? What's next?
Well, I think for the first time in my time in Kashmir anyway, I've actually been able to plan for next season. Right. Because basically the world stopped. Obviously, we're trying to get a team together and improve things. But even we're trying to sort the youth academy out. So there's been a lot of things. So I'm actually looking forward to. It's almost like the world's completely stopped. Somebody's pressed a pause button, and you can get things. Your ducks in a row, and I think as well, myself as a coach, probably for the last 2 years, I've done the same exercises, same sessions, and it's been, to be fair, the team's been successful, but I do need to change. And I'm looking forward to, when I eventually get home, and because the internet's not too great here, is, looking at things online, maybe changing the way I am as a coach, because, there's obviously been a documentary about me, and there's another one coming out next week. Yeah. So there's a lot of swearing and all sorts of stuff in it. So I'm trying to clean my act up a little bit. But I think I've had time to reflect. I think it's been good for me anyway, reflect on my time here and how we can change things, because, you do have to change in how you are. Not just, maybe my approach and the way I want to play, because I want to change the way we play. We're very much a team that will defend and camp in and frustrate teams, because a lot of teams here play like, Barcelona, or try to. And then, we catch teams on the break, and a lot of people have said we're a horrible team to play against. So I need to change that a little bit. We need to try and be a little bit more offensive. So I've got a lot of things up my sleeve that I'm, looking forward to. So hopefully trying to implement them next season.
Brilliant. Well, just to kind of wrap up here, David, just a huge thanks for joining us. A pleasure catching up with you as always. Always enjoyed our chats at the convention when we got together, and taking you back 37 years when I was that wee boy with the tennis ball. It's been a pleasure watching your journey, David. And thanks so much for joining us again. Been an absolute pleasure. Stay safe and all the best. And to you too, Eric. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully speak to you soon. Thanks, David. All the best, mate. Okay. Take care. Cheers, Eric. Bye-bye.